We're at Mount Lebanon Cemetery.
Welcome to America's first public park, believe it or not. Cemeteries became America's first public parks. There were no public parks available at the time. When the rural cemetery movement began in the 1850s, this was it right here, cemeteries. They were away from the city. They were cool, calm, peaceful, clean. People started picnicking here. So welcome to America's first park.
We want to welcome one and all to this tour, which happens every so often. The pandemic put us off for 3 years, and the first tour that we did started in the bicentennial of Lebanon County in 13. So we are working on our 5th tour now. The tour this afternoon will focus on monuments. We've never done that before. So I hope you will be learning something about not only the families that are buried here, but the stones, etc., which grace their plots. One or two other things, a little bit about the history. This particular cemetery was started in 1869, so we're 153 years old this year, and we have 80 acres. Only 40 of that, if that, are set out for interments. So we have another 40 acres waiting for us when as it's needed. So if you come back in another 153 years, we may still be interring people in this cemetery. As I said to somebody else, as long as the money holds out. Several things. We are not charging for this tour, but donations are readily acceptable. So if you feel so inclined at the end of the tour or whenever, please see that we get that. We also have left a few of the history of the books of the cemetery that we put out in 2013 with an addenda in the next year. So those are $5 a throw. So if you want one of those, we can do that as well. We are going to start to the east here, make a big round robin. We will end coming into the mausoleum, and the mausoleum will be open at the end of the tour for all of you to see. How many have seen the mausoleum interior before? A number of you. Okay, all right. It hasn't changed much. The other thing I should mention, I alluded to the fact that there is room for each and every one of you right here. So if you're so inclined, you can purchase your own plot. There are plenty of them available. If you want to be in the mausoleum, there is a columbarium in there that still has room. So whatever your preference, we can accommodate you. Do you have particular questions before we start? Yes.
How much are those books?
Okay, I think we'll get started. Should you be unaware, the gentleman standing beside me is Mr. Michael Trump. You may call him Mr. Research if you wish, because I would say he no longer does that as a hobby. He's on the search for things about Mount Lebanon Cemetery all the time, and he's found things which I certainly would not have found, and we thank him very much for his efforts. He is also, you will find here at the mausoleum and at one of the other stops, flowers, which we put out, and generally, for a school teacher, he's a pretty good guy. There we have it.
it's been a lot of teamwork. It works both ways.
Can you tell everybody your name?
This is Jerry Collins.
Jerry Collins is the old guy, or the deaf guy. You may call me either one. I'll try to answer if I hear you. I'm on the board of managers here at the cemetery. We have currently 10 people on the board. If that strikes an interest in you, our board meetings are the first Monday of every month at 5 o'clock. You're welcome to come in and sit and hear the business being conducted, and maybe that will strike your fancy, and there are vacancies on the board should you feel so inclined. Okay, any other questions?
Also, we are not offended if you drift away from the group because we're getting too windy. That is perfectly fine. We understand if you need heat, that is fine.
Now, there are 2 sets of signs out color-wise, Michael. Tell them why.
The green is where we're actually going to stop. If you look in the distance and we'll point them out, there'll be orange ones. Those are we call distance stops. You're welcome to visit them, but we feel they're too far out, and you got to watch when you're on the path. There's not only dead people here, there are living creatures here, groundhogs in particular. They probably equal in number as the number of residents that are lying under the ground. There are lots of groundhogs, so just be very mindful where you walk. Try to stay to the direct paths, but those orange ones, you are welcome to visit those on your own as we tell a little bit about them.
When we get off the path, we'll try to alert you to where we know the holes are. But if anyone would like 1 or 2 as pets,
Free. There is no charge.
I want one, but I can't have one.
If you can get one, we'll give you this lot. If you focus at the very top of the monument, that is one of the 3 virtues. This is hope. Hope is easily identifiable by her anchor. If you look at the anchor, wherever you see an anchor in there throughout the cemetery, that symbolizes hope. Mr. Myers came from Germany in 1865, and he originally started as when we're doing research, you never know what you're going to find. He started out as a stonemason, which we thought was interesting, but that was short-lived. He went into the trade of iron manufacturing. That was short-lived, and he finally settled on running a hotel, the Central Hotel in Lebanon, up until his death. If you look closely at this particular monument, working all the way down from Hope at the top, you'll see the monument maker's mark in the lower left base. This actually came out of Reading. There are several monuments here that come out of Reading. We'll point out a few that come from Lebanon, but this was a well-known guy at the time. I'm sorry, but I can look at my cheat sheet. I think it's Brown Swagger is the name. So many names are running through my brain. From the Eagle Marble Works, the last name is Eisenbraun. Again, he has lots of work here. That's it for this spot. We're going to head to when it was put there. It is John Steely. He was interred there, and in fact, it's very faint, but it's there. The monument maker is Jeremiah E Daugherty. He even has it inscribed on there. This is the first monument in this cemetery. Jerry E Daugherty. His wife is next to him. The other thing we want to point out is the wall to the right. That is the only enclosed wall in the cemetery. Once that one went up, the cemetery quickly passed an act that no more walls. And you probably think, well, what's wrong with that? You're not the maintenance guy. Not an easy task when you've got to do the cleanup. But that was the last one to go in, and that's 1902, and that was built. It was designed by Abner Richer, which you're going to hear that name later on again. He designed that for the Durr family. One of the key people buried in there is William Durr. William Durr was the attorney for one of the defendants in the famous Blue-Eyed Six trial. He is interred right in there. We're going to head up the road.
That one looks like a tomb. Got a lot of cracks in it.
This is the George W. Klein Monument.
not enough.
W stands for Washington.
A lot of people were named after famous people. Here's a case in point.
Mr. Klein was an attorney. He was well known for whenever he was going to speak, the courthouse would be packed. They loved to hear him talk and talk and talk.
I'd like to know where he lived. Could you tell us?
The land he owned was known as Gallows Hill. Gallows Hill is at the intersection of 9th and 10th Street as you're leaving the city. On the right-hand side, there's a rise of land right there. That was Gallows Hill.
Right beside the railroad tracks.
And they only had, the first hanging in Lebanon County was right there. They changed it after that. It became a huge spectacle. Hundreds and hundreds of people were coming to see the hanging. And the city said right away, we can't do that. So they moved it into the courtyard, or the area of the jail, which was on 8th Street, South 8th Street, where the market is today. The
And they gave
county
out
jail was right there.
tickets.
Well, they actually had to control it by giving out tickets because it became that popular.
Is that where Rite Aid is, where the gallows were?
Across the street, you'll see there's a couple of homes that sit up high right there. That's Gallows Hill. If you notice the slab I'm standing on, it is not a tablet at all. It actually serves a purpose for this grave. It is the entrance to the crypt to go underneath. The family's interred underneath.
The stone is here.
They are in.
Underneath here,
Here.
there are stairs going down.
Wow.
There are only 5 people buried here.
Yep.
The last one was interred in 1926. As far as we know, it's never been opened since. So somebody suggested we do a Halloween tour. Oh, all right.
But we've always been, or at least I've been curious about what does it look like underneath.
Go ahead, confess.
A friend of mine and I, we worked really hard to get a camera down to the little small opening we found here. We didn't have enough light to see what it really looks like down there, but we're still needling it or picking at it. Don't tell Jerry, because he does not like that idea at all.
Didn't
But
hear a thing.
aren't you all curious? Yeah.
I am.
Yes. You'll also want to focus on this monument, the top, the urn with the drape. You'll see lots of them in the cemetery. Very much associated with death, of course. The purpose,
Morning.
it's permanent mourning. That's why the drape is there. When someone died, they would drape you would drape your home with black fabric. Well, this was a permanent one. That's why you'll see them throughout the cemetery. Lots of them. The only thing that's going to be more popular here is going to be crosses and obelisks. Very common.
Now, somebody asked me before the tour began, well, if this cemetery was started in 1869, I see a lot of stones that are older than that. Well, yes, you do. And that is because a lot of these stones are reinterments. If one family bought plots here and were interred here, they wanted Mama and Papa or the grandparents or whoever with them. And so they would reinter them from a church cemetery or wherever you have it. But there are a lot of stones earlier than 1870 when the first interment for this particular cemetery was started. We have Revolutionary War soldiers in here, and we're going to show you one of the oldest section of stones right in back of us.
Number 3.
Which is number 3.
Also, reason for the really was because the churches were neglecting their graveyards. They left them alone. People coming out here saw how beautiful this was once you want your family here. And also, that land in the city is prime real estate. So it worked out well. Let's get rid of the cemeteries or the graveyards and we'll move them out to the cemetery. This sounds nicer than graveyard. We'll focus over here.
This stone is unusual, not only because it's old, but because it is made of sandstone, which usually does not hold up well in the weather. This one is almost readable, and we know from the literature stone of this size, which is rather thin, is called a tablet. So you'll see some of these tablets all over the place, but it's unusual to see a sandstone one because this particular type of stone is not used today in, I don't know, any case.
Don't know.
No.
When the light is perfect, you can see the beautiful inscription on it. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Is it in German?
It is
in
German.
I was going to say,
I mean,
it's hard
it
to
is
read, but it
absolutely
looks German.
perfect. There is not a flaw in any of them. Okay, he was saying about the type of stone. It's a sandstone, which does not hold up very well. We know that Christopher, or Mr. Embick's mother is buried here. That is believed to be the oldest burial here. Remember, it's not the first burial. It's from 1758, I think it is, which came out of the city of Lebanon. We suspect she's over in that area somewhere. There's an open spot. If you also look behind the headstones, you'll see smaller ones. They're the footstones, way in the back. This is Mr. Embick, his first wife, second wife, third wife.
All together.
Not at the same time.
How much of that stone is underground?
We have no idea.
First wife's close to toppling.
What was the question?
Is the first one close to toppling? No, it's been like that for a long time.
All right.
Yeah, they're extremely heavy.
Yeah.
Very, very heavy. And once you start trying to move one, then you feel compelled to move others, and you'll see there are a lot. Now, some were vandals, but some have been nature, freezing, thawing, tree limbs falling, knocking them over, animals, things that it's ongoing. Okay? Peter L. Thank you. Weimer monument. It is 38 feet tall. It is the tallest monument in the park. It was brought here in 1901 from Barry, Vermont. It weighs, just the shaft alone weighs 40 ton. It is massive. And we know that because there's a newspaper article about this coming to the cemetery. It was brought in on the Philadelphia-Reading Railroad, and from there transported by wagon to this spot. I wish there were pictures to show us them erecting it. I can't even imagine how they did it. It is really something.
And you just should have seen Mr. Trump climb this so he could measure it. It was wonderful. He came down, his nose was bleeding because of the pain, but anyway, he survived it, and so it's here. And how about the interments on the other side here?
Of the Weimer family.
Yes.
Do you want to tell me about the Weimers?
Okay, this side is Peter. Peter and his father and brother started the Weimer Machine Works in Lebanon, which was a big company at that time. And Peter himself was a mayor of Lebanon, among other things. And then on the back, you'll see Edgar, his son. Happens to be that Edgar was a mayor also, again, not at the same time. And Edgar on the back held a lot of the patents for the Weimer Machine Works. So he was, I guess he wouldn't mind if we say he was the brains.
Oh, yeah. But Papa was the money.
Yeah. Now, I think we should tell them the story about the Civil War and Gettysburg. When the Confederate forces came up through Chambersburg, it was thought that they wanted to hit Harrisburg. No. Their stop, or their goal, was to hit Lebanon and the Weimer Machine Works, because they were supplying what you have for the Union troops. They never made it this far, but that was their plan. So that's a little bit of local
history.
More than gossip.
Also, his brother John, if you look straight up the hill, you'll see gotta be careful. There's an obelisk straight up. You'll see the orange sign with the letter, is that E? E. Right to the right of that orange sign, that's his brother John. His obelisk is shorter, as you can see. that went up first. This one goes up second. He had to outdo his brother.
We'll never see any more monuments, say in Weimer, will we?
Oh, yes, we will.
Oh, we will. Okay.
There's a Dr. Weimer. Relation?
Yes. Right at, is that 7th and, would that be?
Where was it?
Yeah, it was at right at the railroad. Is that Skull Street?
Well, it was at 8th and Skull.
8th and Skull.
Yeah.
Yes, 8th and Skull.
Okay. Watch your.
Yeah, I see it. Again, be careful. We're going to head up on this short path, and then there's an unusual about the tree because whenever we meet someone in the cemetery while we're researching, almost everyone will ask, "There's a tree down below. What is that?" And we know right away what they're talking about. This is a longleaf magnolia. We believe it is the only one in Lebanon County, possibly the state. It is a very, very unusual tree. It just produced its last blossom about 2 weeks ago. They are enormous, white, extremely beautiful. The seed pods are starting to set right now, but every year we're keeping our fingers crossed that please make it another year, because it is a real gem. But we want to focus on this monument right here.
Well, why, Michael? This is not larger than the monuments we've seen.
No.
So, but the color's unusual.
This is called a white bronze monument. However, it is neither white nor bronze. It's actually a bluish color tint, you can see that, and it is made of zinc. Would you like to tap on it? I don't know if you can hear that sound. It is hollow.
I'll be darned.
This, there's only one company that ever made them in the United States, out of Hartford, Connecticut.
The Monumental Bronze Company, Bridgeport, Connecticut.
To get a tombstone like this, there was no showroom because there was over 500 designs possible. So if you wanted to see one, you had to visit a cemetery if you could find one, or you could look at the catalog. Research is showing that if you can find more than 12 in a cemetery, the salesman did quite well. There are 19 here in Mount Lebanon of different sizes. If you turn and look in that direction over there, you'll see the letter C. There's a small cluster of 4 of them right there. So you have an idea of how different they are. They're not all like this. There's another one that's the same height, but a little different than this one here in Mount Lebanon. The tallest one in Lebanon County is at Cedar Hill Cemetery. It is marking the, it's the Soldiers Monument to the Civil War at Cedar Hill Cemetery in Fredericksburg, or just north of Fredericksburg. That's the largest one in the county that I have found. When a person wanted to purchase one of these, they focused on the panels. They're on, in this case, this is a 4-panel one. I did find a 6-panel one near Mount Zion. You could get the usual items like this on it, pictures, organizations that you belong to, just about anything was possible. The company, they started around 1889 is about when they become popular. And up to about 1901. However, the company did exist up until 1915, World War I. The government took over the company saying you need to start producing items for the war effort, which that hurt the company. They no longer produced ornaments after that. However, up until 1929, 1930, you were still able to get the panels. The panels were produced by a company throughout the area. The research I found, you should be able to find a marking along the base of who was doing the panel. I've looked at all 19 here at Mount Lebanon. Not one has a marking on it who produced the panels.
Well, the family here appears to be Gunther, G-umlaut, U-N-T-H-E-R. Were they Irish?
With the umlaut? No.
No. German, yes. So it's Theobald Gunther and his wife, Rosina, and their daughter.
And guess what his profession was? A stone cutter. How ironic.
Go figure.
And when these were becoming popular, the stonemasons in the area did everything to squash this. It was cutting into their business. Said, you don't want these. These are not going to last. They deteriorate. They're going to be a thing of the past. They've actually held up quite well. This one here is from, we're finding the oldest, or the newest that we can find is around 1901. After that, there are no more.
Did they have a local salesman then, or?
We did find a one ad that the company was placing someone here, looking for someone to help sell these monuments. We did find a one time it appeared in the newspaper. We suspect Dougherty, who is one of the tombstone makers here, he probably had a lot to say of keeping him out of town. He also served on the board here at the cemetery. Okay?
I want to point out is that it is especially decorative. It has an entranceway to it, and there were at one time urns with a drape on both sides. The one is broken off now, and up here you have a large central monument, and it is filled with lovely, lovely symbols. In the middle, you see two doves. On each side of the doves, you see a flame upside down to indicate that
A life extinguished.
and you'll find this not often in Mount Lebanon.
It's the only ones that we're aware of the inverted torch.
The other thing about this monument is that it has a cross at the top with, again, some flower decorations on it. It is raised from the ground. There's no crest underneath, but it is raised. And what does it say about there's a signature on there, Michael.
Right here.
Oh, yeah. Eagle.
It says the Eagle Marble Works, and they are out of, we pointed out earlier, out of Reading.
Is there anybody in here who has heard of the Eagle Marble Works from Reading? Ah, over here there's some hands raised. Okay. What have you found, Captain Mark?
We were sent on a mission to find the Eagle Marble Works in Reading, and we located some etchings that document the factory on 6th and Elm. It's no longer there, but it's very close to the railroad, so which makes sense if they would just sort of load them on. And they were also owned by Eisenbrown.
Yeah.
That was the company that's sort of, the name is over top of where it says Eagle Marble Works. Eisenbrown is on the top, and Eisenbrown is still a company in business today that's creating tombstones.
Wow. Out of Reading.
Out of Reading, yeah.
Also, when this one was put up, there was a spat in the newspaper about this particular monument between Mr. Spawn and Mr. Dougherty, who was the other the popular tombstone provider here in town. It starts off, Dougherty is upset. First of all, he's not buying, Mr. Spawn is not buying his monument from Dougherty. And also he starts attacking the size of it, the shape of it. It doesn't match, it's ill proportioned. So it's going on back and forth, and finally Mr. Spawn ends it with, it's my money, I will spend it the way I want to spend it, and guess what? It was $200 cheaper than what you were offering. So they had a little spat over this in 1889 is when this one went up.
So the Spawn that had this erected was Henry, which is over here. He was the manager of a prominent hotel in Philadelphia. He had this made, and also when this was done, he evidently brought his parents with him. So you see two tablets there, which are his parents.
But he was born and raised here in Lebanon, and he came back to the interior.
When he traveled to Philadelphia, he ran a line to Philadelphia to his hotel. It was very popular, but then he had a fire, but quickly rebuilt after that. He wanted to get it up and completed for the centennial of the nation, and he did.
We have another celebration coming up.
Also, I wonder, the three tombstones, the large ones, they all face in that direction. Dougherty's grave is in that direction. So he's letting me know, I'm over here.
This is storytelling one. Probably with urns and drapes and so forth, this is one of the finest you'll find, and preserved very, very well. This is the monument for Harrison Kaulbach and his wife. but even more famous than Harrison and his wife, and maybe I should say more well-heeled, on the back, is Minnie. Now, Minnie Kaulbach was a musician. She taught, she sang, she taught both at Lebanon and Lebanon Valley College for a little bit, and she lived to a ripe old age, and probably outdid her parents in fame. But again, you'll see one of the best preserved monuments here in Lebanon Cemetery.
It's made up of 12 individual pieces, including the 4 columns with the acanthus leaves curled. Just beyond, you'll see the Miller monument where this lady is headed towards. We were going to feature that, but then we decided, no, let's go with this one. But the Millers wanted to outdo the Kaulbachs. That is made up of 15 pieces. This is only 12. So there's a little bit of always competition going on, even in the cemetery, trying to outdo each other. Location is another key factor where the monuments are located. If your monument's along the roadway, you're going to pay a higher price for that because it's the common path that people are going to walk. You want to be noticed. Those who are in further, people aren't going to generally bother with those at that time.
I'm interested in mausoleums, Michael. How many does Mount Lebanon have?
There are 2 private and 1 community. We'll end the tour with the community
Would
one.
one of those be the Spang Mausoleum?
Yes, it is. Right here.
We had tried and tried to get the Spang Mausoleum open for you folks today, but we have not been able to contact the family, and there are some family descendants still living, and one in New Jersey, one up in Boston, but we could not contact them, so we didn't feel we had permission to open it for you. But you can look in the front doors there, and on the far side, you'll see a wonderful stained glass window. You'll see crypts above ground on each side, 4 on each side, and straight ahead, you'll see a 16 niche columbarium. Only one person from the Spang family is in there, so there's room for 15 more. We'll see if that ever happens. I don't know. Mr. Trump, with his lovely measuring stick, can tell you how big it is.
It is 12 feet by 12 feet. Measured at, don't know the height of it. We do not know when it was put here. Possibly the 1920s. We're making a connection with another Spang monument that we found out further, and it clearly says something about George T. Spang, who was interred here. So we know there's a connection. Possibly the money came from the estate to put up that and this, but we have no proof. There's nothing in the records about it. Can't find a newspaper article, nothing.
The last interment here was Dr. Weber. His mother was a Spang, and he died in 2017 and was interred in here in 2018. So that's the last that we know of.
The Spangs were, one of the Spangs was the mayor of Lebanon at one time. Another Spang that's also interred there, they owned what was known as the almshouse or the poorhouse, roughly in the area where Home Depot is. They owned all that land right there.
I think one of the Spangs lived south of Lebanon. Did they not?
Yes.
Would that be Spang Crest?
Yes.
Ah,
It was also the same family.
And I think one of the Spangs at one time owned a theater.
Yes.
It became the Academy Theater, is now torn down, of course, but that was another one of their enterprises. So Spang is a well-known name here in the Lebanon County area.
It was originally the Fisher Opera House. Mr. Spang had it torn down and put up the Spang Theater, which was very popular, which turns into the Academy Theater.
That's still there.
No, the Academy Theater's gone. No.
You sure?
Yeah, it was leveled.
Package there now.
Well, there's no.
There was a fight to preserve the Academy,
Right.
and we lost that fight.
Excuse me. Well, the state is still there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's boxwood. That's very old boxwood. And boxwood's very slow growing, extremely slow growing. So those are prized shrubbery right there.
Which, if this was put in the 20s, these boxwood are about 100 years old by now. So you can, they're wonderful. Then there's some more around the circle here.
Is the Lord Plot. Mr. Lord was the president of the American Iron and Steel Company. His office was located right at the northwest corner of Lincoln Avenue and Cumberland Street. That large, massive building you see right there. That was his office. That eventually gets acquired by Bethlehem Steel, as some of you may know. They turned that into their offices. A very wealthy person, very popular person. He was from Delaware, though. He came to the area because of the steel industry. He certainly wants to show that he has money by putting in this large circle. It's the only circular one here at Mount Lebanon Cemetery. There are only 6 interments there, room for lots more. And the groundhogs love that spot. So if you venture near, please, please, please watch where you're going. They are everywhere in that one. Maybe a status symbol with the groundhogs. We've got the Lord Plot. If you notice the palm frond in the front there, that symbolizes triumph over death. Any questions at this one? We're going to get back on the path now. It's a little short. The caretaker seems closer to that one. If you notice the girl one is at least 2 times that height. It's an unusual spelling for Lebanon County. It's D-A-N-E-Y. It doesn't have the H in it. If you notice the woman descending the stairs and the broken column. You see a broken column in the cemetery, that signifies a life cut short. Mrs. Beatty, or Pearl, her name is, she died a week after giving birth to their son. The son lived to adulthood, and he's interred way in the back area over there. This was put here in 1908. It is the only one of its kind found here at Mount Lebanon. There's another broken column, but does not have the person descending the stairs.
Exactly.
That'll get the crowd moving. We don't think so. We've seen it before, but never investigated any further, but we don't think so. We've seen that name come up before in Lebanon's history. Where you're standing is actually a combination of what's called blocks. If you notice the crosses in this area, to my back, to your back, down the hillside over there, that is known as the Serbian block. It was a group for the religious group. They were allotted this whole area over here, took over that area. But if you look over in this area over here, you'll see lots of empty area. That is known as the poor block. You might, as we get closer up to the roadway, you'll see there's an orange, one of those distant stops. That is the stop of 2 of the Blue-Eyed Six are buried here. Brandt and, my mind drew, Drews. One of them was a case of good soldier, bad citizen. He was a Civil War veteran. He contacted Durr, who he knew through Civil War would he help represent him. Remember, that's the one that's the enclosed area. They had conspired again to kill a man for insurance purposes. So 2 of them are buried here. They are the only 2 that are interred here in the poor block. One thing that always comes up when we first started doing tours, someone said there was some children had died here, and we kept researching it because everybody kept asking, but they didn't know the details of it. Well, we finally got the story. What happened is here in the Serbian block, the parents were putting flowers at her mother's grave. They had 4 children in the car, parked right about here. The children were left in the car, and they were doing the usual children thing, carrying on. Parents didn't think much of it. All of a sudden, the car starts drifting down the hill. As it's drifting away, the elder boy, which turned out to be the nephew of the family that was putting the flowers at the grave, he gets out and tells them the car's rolling away, and the father, of course, is running like crazy, and the mother trying to get it to stop. By the time they get to it, it had already gone down the hill, managed to go between trees, and goes right into the water down below there. So 3 of the 4 children drowned in that. They are not interred here. We did a lot of research trying to find out where are they interred. You would think they're here. They are not. A good friend of mine and I, we finally found them. They're buried in Middletown. A very sad case because after those children had drowned, they were told to have another child that will help things. They did have another child. The mother died shortly thereafter, The child survived to age 16. He was riding his bicycle on the highway when was killed by a drunk driver. So the tragedy just doesn't end. But that's part of doing this research. They all have the same ending, but how they get there is different. Yes.
Is that where the water is then? Over there?
Yeah, just down below here you'll see Stover's Dam.
Oh, Staver's Dam.
Staver's Dam. You hear Stover's Dam.
I see. Back there at that orange D is where the blue-eyed six are buried in the poor lot.
This lady right here said she was here at the time when it had happened. There were two other people, and they also ran into the water and dove in to try to get the children out of the car. The kids were carrying on that much that they locked the doors, and the parents were trying to tell them, unlock it. They waved to them as they were going down. It's so tragic.
Don't you really? What's your name? Do you mind saying your name?
George Crater.
Thank you.
He was an attorney for the Freeman family of Cornwall.
Yeah.
If you look down the hill, you'll see the flagpole. That is known as the fireman's block. That was put there in 1928. I hurried off the names of the stations that are represented there. There are 20 markers for Union, Rescue, Chemical, Washington, Independent, Hook and Ladder, and a Perseverance. And it was erected by the Lebanon Firemen's Relief Association, again in 1928. It's one of those blocks, as they're called. We passed the poor block, Serbian block, fireman's block. Up ahead will be the soldier's block. His story.
Okay. The night that Theodore David Fisher died on the roots in the Mississippi River, his mother, Louisa, woke up. She woke up her husband and said, something has happened. True or false, it was told to me by a lady of some years who had heard it, but not at this time. So,
You're right. That is France. He was an undertaker, and he was a key person on the chairman of the board of the cemetery. He picked a prime spot.
Looks like a castle.
now, if we were voting on the top 5 monuments in Mount Lebanon Cemetery, this would be one of the top 5. This is the Fisher Memorial, and it is a memorial to Theodore David Fisher, their one and only son and child. He, from what we know, was a born leader, and the Civil War was on, and he begged his parents to join, and Mama said no, and she happened to have a relation of hers who was a paymaster in the Civil War, and she said, okay, you can join your uncle as a paymaster. So that's what he did. They were out on the Mississippi in the steamship Root, and it caught fire. Theodore David Fisher got off the boat safely, could not find his uncle, and thought his uncle was still on board. He went back to save him. He was never seen again. His body was never recovered, so this is a monument in his memory. His body is not here. They never found it. But as you might gauge, the parents, Philip and Louisa, never got over his death. And they died within the same year, a little bit later on, 82. The parents of Louisa are also here as well. But this was brought in from Connecticut, and again by rail, we assume. And it is wonderful in its design, and I value it very highly.
Yeah, it's inscribed on the one side. It'll say NE Monument Company. It's for New England Monument Works. So it came from Vermont. Connecticut, sorry. The Fishers, they were connected with the Spangs. They owned the Fisher Opera House. Mr. Fisher was one of two people that were instrumental in putting, there used to be a chapel on the cemetery grounds.
Who was that in memory of?
Their son. And he paired up with Joseph Bowman, who wanted to put a memorial to his wife. So they collaborated, put their money together to erect a small chapel that stood right where the mausoleum is today.
And they were cousins.
Right, they were first cousins.
Yep.
We have never ever found a picture of the chapel. So if you know of anybody,
if you ever find a picture of the chapel, I know someone who will pay big money to be on the lookout.
It's bizarre because it stood till 1928. By 1928, box cameras were popular. You would think somebody would have taken a picture of it. Nothing. Just bizarre. Not even an engraving. Nothing. One more thing I just discovered about this monument, because I'm really into graveyards or cemeteries. I was at Laurel Hill Cemetery a few years ago, and I took a tour by myself, and I taken a picture, and just recently I was going through the pictures, and I discovered I had found a marker or monument exactly like this one at Laurel Hill in Philadelphia.
Wow.
I didn't tell you that one. I had a store in a men and boys store in town, very much supported the Boy Scouts. Purchased the land where Camp Bayshore is located and gave it to the Boy Scouts. That particular marker, if you notice the script that's on it, it is the only one that we're aware of that's in cursive writing. There's no other one in cursive style that we know of here at the cemetery. I love cursive writing, so I always point that one out.
And when he died, J.S. Bayshore was on 28 board of directors, which will give you some idea of the popularity and the tone of this man.
Also, it was noted too, whenever it was your birthday, when you were a boy, you went into the store, he always gave you a gift. I did run into a gentleman several years ago. He said, I still have my gift from Mr. Bayshore. It was a bag of marbles. I thought it was really neat. Do you want to talk about the soldier's block?
Soldier's block contains soldiers from all of these markers that you see in the front here. Unfortunately, we do not get many interments for soldiers anymore. And I bet somebody can guess why. Indian Town Gap. The difference being Indian Town Gap, free. We cannot afford that. And so we still have soldiers buried here through the Korean War. There are a couple Vietnam, not many. There's also one down there for the Indian Wars. And you also will see here that some of the markers are new. We had a gentleman who would research these markers that were no longer readable, and there is a federal program now that if you apply for it, you can get a federal marker all the same, but appropriately marked and put in the old one's place. So we were very fortunate in getting a lot of that done.
Most of them are from the Civil War. There are 2 women buried in there. They served in World War II. They're at the lower part. You'll see there's a roadway. The soldier's block continues onto that side. We found out recently that the cannonballs, they are not original. The original set were stolen. and actually early, about 1887, they disappear. They suspected they were wanted for scrap. The cannons, you want to tell them about the cannons? They're not original either.
No, we had a collector before my time, but some years ago, from Alabama, as I recall, and he said, "Oh, would I love to have those for my collection?" And we said, "They're not for sale." And he offered thousands of dollars for them, and we looked at the bills and said, "I guess they're for sale." So they were sold. He supplied the replicas that you see there, so it doesn't look bad, but it's not the original. Sorry.
Also, the markings, the old tombstone markings, we kind of suspect that those markings were done by, or the engravings on them were done by someone who was serving as an apprentice. As you start looking at it, you're going to see it's sloppy work. It's not pristine at all at the other ones that you'll see. So it's quite possible those were all an apprentice, and they were probably donated to the cemetery.
Okay, onward and upward.
Yep. Just as an opener, walking through here, the lady said, "Oh, there's a lot of rhinos buried here," and I chuckled.
You wouldn't believe it. All this is Rhino. All that is Rhino. There's rhinos down there. There's rhinos in the community mausoleum. We counted just in this area over 70 interments of rhinos. Well, as you might guess, talented as they may have been, perhaps their chief talent was in turning out children each year, and so they did. Adolphus Rhino here, who was commonly called the judge, he was a partner in Rhino and Meyer, which was one of the biggest firms at the time in Lebanon. When Meyer died, it said in his obituary, he was wealthy. And this guy was the partner. He was a burgess, I found, not of the borough of Lebanon, but the borough of North Lebanon for 3 different times.
Right.
So he had a good rep and everything. And the monument that you see here is quite nice. You see the letter R there for Rhino. You see a cross at the top, almost like it was sitting on a table with a cloth underneath it. And this is the more modern one. There is also a Rhino memorial right beside of it, which is not too shabby either. So please continue.
We don't know why he was called a judge, because he wasn't a judge at all. He was involved in the lumber business.
It was a nickname.
Yeah.
Probably a nickname of some respect.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, definitely.
Or very judgmental.
He was from a family of 13 children, and he and his wife, Adolphe, and his wife went on to have 9 children. They all reached adulthood. That's why we have all of this.
Is this a town of Rhino?
Not that we know of.
No.
Did he live in this area? Because this area is referred to like Rhinosville.
Yeah, Rhino's.
He lived in Lebanon. They want to know, did he live in Lebanon?
Yes. Yes.
Like, but
Yeah.
it's good then because like down like on Miller Street, that was referred to as Rhinosville.
Oh, I never heard of that.
Old-timers
There still is a Rhinosville.
Yeah, there's a
Rhinos.
Rhinosville
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Rhinos.
and Rhinos. Yes, I've heard of that. Focus on this monument right here. It's called Rock of Ages. Very, very popular marker in the rural cemeteries, except Mount Lebanon. It is the only one found here at Mount Lebanon. Again, very popular outside of the area. The only one of its kind. It was put here in 1934 for the Kowaleski family. Just a very common family, very middle class. They weren't extremely wealthy, but they wanted to make their mark by putting this stone there. It comes from, I found a little piece on that Rock of Ages. It's from a hymn from 17. Sorry. Yeah, it's at the very top. It's hard to see if it is inscribed simply to the cross I cling, which are lyrics from Augustus Tomplade's hymn written in 1763. You'll see it inscribed right across the top.
Now Michael will favor us with one or two verses. No?
No. You will clear out here real fast.
Maybe next tour.
This area over here, just close to the ground, you'll see some of these white bronze monuments. There's a cluster of two over here, and in the distance there are two more. You just look for that unusual color, so you have an idea how small they can be. There's a very small one over here. Okay, we want to really focus on this one right here.
This is a cairn, C-A-I-R-N. Webster defines it as a heap of stones thrown on top of one another. Some monuments or memorials are indeed that. This is a very fancy cairn. You open it up, find them with this symbolism on it. At this time, here again is the grate. Here again are foliage. And it is, we found two such fair examples. There may be some more, I'm not sure. But now the story is for the Hart's family. Get out your handkerchiefs, dab your eyes. Michael's going to tell you about it.
The Hart's family, they had a daughter that died young. That's what this stone is for, put in memory of her. Again, look closely all the way around it. You'll see all kinds of symbolism on there. Ivy, calla lily, the scroll, not just the draping of the cloth, but there's fringe on the cloth. I mean, he really went above and beyond on this one. The family went on to, the mother had died a few years after the daughter had died. The father remarried and was on his honeymoon with his second wife, and the grandparents had taken in two other children, babysitting them. And when the parents were on their honeymoon, one of the children caught, was it diphtheria, and died before the family could get back from their honeymoon. She is interred, the small one, in the back. And the mother is back there, and the father is not buried here. He is buried in Anvil Cemetery. Okay? Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, I was going to tell you
Another
that.
curse of stone. Oh my gosh, I missed that one. Two. Thank you for putting it out. You watch Jerry is coming into the plot.
The plot thickens.
There's actually a stepping stone to get in it.
I would say that the stonework in Mount Lebanon, by and large, in the earlier years was done by this man here, Jeremiah Dougherty. And Jeremiah was really a man about town. I think we constantly find more about him. He was on the board of Mount Lebanon Cemetery for a while. He built a lovely, huge home over on South 10th Street called Linden. Was it?
Just Linden.
And had a beautiful peach orchard there. And he had a good number of children. He was not as lucky as the Rhinos. They met their maker pretty soon. This particular one has a nice bed to it. That is front headstone. And what they used to do in the good old days is they used to put flowers inside it. Now, somebody, I won't mention names, put flowers in it today just so you could see how beautiful they could be. And we do know that some cemeteries now have people, friends of the cemetery, adopt one of these each year, and they see that they're planted. Makes a very nice idea.
They're called cradle graves because it looks like a bed. It's meant that you are at rest, not in death. This particular one I discovered when I was moving. There's slabs underneath this that really go to those cradle graves up there. I moved it, and after I got chased away by bees, you know, there's a bee's nest in there, I discovered that every one of them has an opening, which you need for plants, for the water to drain out. This particular one, its opening for water drain is a cross. You can't see because I put the plants in it. I did this because we wanted you to see what it looks like. This is what it's meant to be. About 5 years ago, as Jerry is saying, in Philadelphia's Woodlawn Cemetery, a woman discovered these and decided to introduce it to some friends. And they threw the idea out, and they said, we'll be lucky if we get 10 people. They had over 125 people respond to it. They had to turn them away until they could get their bearings straight of how they're going to run the whole program. You adopt a grave, and you're responsible for taking care of that bed. It's worked well, because the people that are adopting these beds have no connection to that grave, but these are city folks that like gardening and don't have a plot of ground. This gives them a chance to come to the cemetery, do their craft, relax. It's very therapeutic. It's really going back to the rural cemetery movement, when people would do this with their graves. They would also include a picnic lunch with that. Very, very popular. Here at Mount Lebanon, they actually had to control it with tickets. At first, they stopped it. You were not allowed unless you were a lot holder, and people were really having a fit about it, and it was hard for them to control people out of it. So they would allot so many tickets for people to get on here. Bicycles were a huge problem because they were finding this was a beautiful area to travel through here. They controlled that. You weren't allowed to have bicycles. The automobile became a problem. They were speeding through here at 15 miles an hour. They had to control that. They prohibited cars for a long time, and then finally they eventually had to give in. But this is probably, if I had to pick my favorite, this is probably one of my ultimate favorites. I just love the idea of it.
Perhaps we should also say something about Jeremiah and his wife's monument here. They are right here. Now you can see this was designed by somebody who knew monuments. One, they slope so the water will run off. Secondly, they are inscribed on the side so that even today they are quite readable. They are not hit by wind, rain, and so forth. So they are here, Jeremiah and his wife, Lydia, whose parents are right back there. And Jeremiah took care not only of his own plot, but also the one next door, so to speak.
This is the Snavely Beardsley, but we do not know of any kind of connection to the family. We just know that he took care of both plots. He started his business in 1853 and remained in business all the way until 1901. The daughter takes over the business for a short time. He had also served as a burgess of Lebanon, of the township of Lebanon before Lebanon became a city. He was the second remaining one to survive of the old timers.
This is one of perhaps the nicest clump of beds in Mount Lebanon Cemetery. You see 3 right in a row here. But you also see that we had our groundskeeper cover up umpteen groundhog holes just last week. Already we have another hole dug here today. They're busy little critters.
Just briefly about the Seltzers. Mr. Seltzer was in the mercantile business. The daughter died January 1st of the year 1892. The father died 2 days later, January 3rd, 1892. So they actually had a dual funeral. Reading the newspaper, we actually found an article that there were 2 dual funerals that week in Lebanon. The only time that we know that has ever happened. It was very unusual, but it was enough that it was put in the newspaper.
The Airhorns came to Lebanon and they located out near 7th and Hill Street, North Lebanon. They built a rather nice residence there, and that's where they raised their family. The father is over here on the left, the first one. He was a brewer, and rather successfully, so I might add. And his children, especially Eleonora, was well educated. She was a nurse, and many times their family had 4 names. So this was Eleonora E. Airhorn, and she would say E straight across the boards. So she was a rather formidable woman, very active until late in life, when she had a major stroke and was confined for a couple years prior to her death to Cedar Haven. What is unusual is this stone right here. It is a date stone, but the 1887 period on the date stone is the date when the Airhorn house was built. And so Eleonora, when the house was sold and everything, made arrangements that this date stone to her house, where she grew up and loved, would be placed on her grave with her dates below it. And so it's here, the only known house date stone on Mount Lebanon Cemetery that we have found today.
Mr. Airhorn, on the grounds here, when you're coming into the cemetery, if you look to your left and right, just before you get where the interments are, you'll see an area where the land sinks down. There were actually 2 large lakes on the property. Mr. Airhorn had the job of cutting the ice and storing it for his brewery, so he got the ice. The cemetery would also sell off acre lots of grass. It was a way for them to get some money. So they would, the farmers or whoever wanted the grass would come in and cut it, pay for it, and haul it away. David and Christiana, his wife, we chose this one because of the symbolism that's on it. You'll notice the urns at the top with the draping, permanent mourning. You'll see the oak leaf, that is for strength, and laurel. This is oak, this is laurel. A morning glory on the drape, on the table. Very ornamental. This is also Dougherty's work. This one has his initials, J-E-D. This one says Dougherty right at the bottom. It's interesting when you come here different times of the day or time of the year, certain things you don't see, and then you come back and visit later. It's all in how the light hits things. We didn't see that until a few weeks ago. It's just the way the light had hit it for us. It was perfect at that time.
True or false, these were reinterred.
They're reinterred. They were brought here. To the left of the Carmodys is their son, David Carmody. He was the last surviving Burgess of the township of Lebanon. He died in 1914. Mr. Dougherty was the second last. He died in 1911. Since you're here in the shade, just briefly about these T.T. Worth Mausoleum. If you remember the Spang Mausoleum, they are all in tombs above ground. The Worths is not. When you go inside, you'll see there's a large slab on the floor, just like the Kleins. That gets removed, and you go down a series of steps, and you'll find three entombed individuals there. Mr. and Mrs. Worth, and her sister. They are interred there.
T.T. Worth was a magazine editor, again, very successful, and he knew the important people, not only in Lebanon, but in Pennsylvania. When they built this memorial, they gave some money to the cemetery to maintain it, and when Mrs. Worth died, she gave instructions that every week it is supposed to be swept out. We somehow don't do that anymore, but that was her wish at least. And again, if you look in here, stained glass window, like you saw at the Spang.
Mrs. Worth had spotted one just like it in Laurel Hill Cemetery, and she wanted it duplicated right here at Mount Lebanon, 1892.
Here we have the Schnecks. The Schnecks are an interesting family, and I spent the wee hours last evening looking for more information about them. We thought they were doctors. Well, in a manner of speaking, they were. But Dr. Benjamin Schmeck was a DD, a doctor of divinity. He was a minister, not a medical doctor. He had a son, Henry, who may have been a medical doctor. We don't know for sure, but we do know about Benjamin. Benjamin died in Chambersburg and was buried there, but we suspect that when one of the last survivors died here, she had their stones moved up here. So this is a reinterment. Beside her is the Reverend Henry Wagner. Henry Wagner, for 16 years, was a pastor of Tabor Church at 10th and Willow, or 10th and Walden. His two wives are there, again, as Michael would say, not at the same time. The one here in the front lived to the ripe old age of 85, we're told. There are small stones back there, are readable at times, considering the light.
Yep.
But we need more research on this, even though, again, you have Schneck up there, a very nice column, and a tapered shaft there, and there's a Latin inscription here. Vita brevis, life is brief, ars longa.
No, it's life is short. Art is long. What it means is, what we interpret it as, to learn a craft may take you a whole lifetime to master it. Life is short, art is long. To learn that art or that skill takes you a long lifetime to do that.
And by the way, Dr. Benjamin, D.D., spent a large percentage of his life in publication of Reformed Church material, starting with the Messenger and some Pennsylvania German periodicals, let me say. His health was not always robust. And back at this time, by the way, we should mention that pastors did not just have one church. Dr. Schmeck, D.D., had 8 churches at one time. Well, you can imagine trying to get to 8 churches, you know, maybe once a month, but that's the way it was back at that time. Okay? That William Burnside never opened a book in his life, right?
Incorrect.
Incorrect. One of the prime educators here in Lebanon County is William Burnside. And he is buried here with his wife and his only son, which is, so it says here, also his mother, and something I found out last night, his father is here too, but it's not listed at all. But there were 2 William Burnsides in the record in the office. One ours, another one born 30 years before. This monument is nice because it is round with a nice capped urn at the top, and I'll bet you if I twist his arm hard enough, Michael will tell us how he died.
After he retired from teaching, he ran a boys' private school in Lebanon. He got into the newspaper business and was a faithful worker in his profession up until his death. He actually was found dead in his chair in his office. They thought he was sleeping and let him go, and someone said, "I think we better check on Mr. Burnside." At that time, the newspapers reported every little detail, right down to who found Mr. Burnside. So he was found in his chair, dead.
He died with his boots on, folks. Now you may remember near the beginning of the tour, I asked this guy here, those are the only Weimer memorials? And he said, no. Here we have a third very nice Weimer memorial put in by Lucian. And Lucian was a member of the board, your manager's here. Lucian was also one of the partners of the Weimer Machine Works. Lucian had very deep pockets, and so when bills were wanting to be paid, he said, "I'll take care of it," and so he did for years. The monument is unusual. We don't know who the lady is. It's not faith, it's not hope. We don't think it's charity. It may be a Grecian or Roman deity, I don't know, but at any rate, very nice. And then if you look at the cross right to the left of him, you'll see John Weimer. That's John Weimer, the mayor. So we had 3 Weimer mayors here in Lebanon, which is a record I can't see being broken ever.
If you look at the facade right here, you'll see oak leaves, that's for strength. On the opposite side is ivy, that is for endurance. A beautiful monument. He certainly, I think, outdid his brother, Peter, and little John. Particular, whoops, this one over here. If you'll notice that it's a pedestal, you'll notice a large book on top, it's a Bible, and a smaller book, which is probably a catechism. This is for Reverend Franklin Kramer, extremely popular Reformed Church member or minister of Lebanon. He ministered at Tabor, He had a horrible ending. He was to go to a conference in the western part of the state, but one of his prisoners had passed away, and he said, I'm going to stay back and take care of her funeral. And they said, no, 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 go to the conference. You need to be there. He said, nope, I care for my flock of sheep. I'm staying here. I will take care of the funeral. Then I will go to the conference. On the way to the conference, his carriage in 1899 was hit by a fast-moving train just north of Anvil. It was reported that over 6,000 people attended his funeral. Also, his casket was never in a hearse. The prisoners insisted on carrying his casket from the home, they didn't have funeral homes then, to the church, from the church to Mount Lebanon Cemetery. That was all reported in the paper. Extremely popular minister. This is one of 2 pulpits found here at Mount Lebanon. The other one is the Litzel. He was also a Reformed minister.
You know what year that was where he got hit by the train?
1899. He was that well liked too, and his mother wanted to know who she was and who her son was. On her stone, it's recorded her name, son of Reverend Kramer. She wanted people to know who she was as well, because he was extremely popular. Lots of things in the paper about him. Very.
We must tell you that we do not have electricity inside. There is electricity, but it's not working. And we have tried several times, and it was supposed to be done today, but obviously it is not. So both this young guy here and this old guy here have flashlights, so we can show you some of the famous people that are buried, well, the crypts of some famous people that are buried here, which you will recognize. There are rooms in here, there are individual crypts, there is a columbarium. We'll try to point all that out to you. And when you've seen what you wish to see in here, you're free to leave. If you want to give Mike or myself a donation, that'll put a smile to our faces. And come back when you're ready to be reinterred here. We will have a place.
You didn't tell us how old you are. You said you're an old guy.
I'm old and I forget,
I know his age.
but nice try. If you tip him enough, he'll tell you.
Okay.
Just a little bit about the mausoleum. They first proposed a community mausoleum in 1915. It died off. It just wouldn't take off because they didn't get enough subscribers to it. They tried again in 1927 and became much more successful through the first time was with the York Mausoleum Company. The second time was the Smith Mausoleum Company. That was out of Reading, PA. The architect of this is interred here. That is Abner Richer. I'd mentioned his name way back at the beginning. If you remember the Dur plot, he designed that wall. But he has lots of work throughout Lebanon, Berks, Schuylkill County, Dauphin County. They are all over. Once you know his style, you recognize that's got to be a Richer piece. This piece is very unusual for his work. He also designed the office as you come into the cemetery.
Okay, we're ready. Excuse me. Yes. Yes.
It's cool.
Feel free to stand on either side. You certainly don't have to holler in here.
It's more beautiful than I could have imagined in here. Still coming in.
You recognize when you come in here, or you're drawn to, is the cathedral glass windows. The Good Shepherd. Over here to the west is Christ knocking at the door, and over here to the east is Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. Look around closely and you will see rooms. They're actually called deluxe rooms. They were for families that wanted to be a little more private. Once we go through our talk, you're welcome to walk through and look inside. Please don't enter them. We know 2 are open, but stay out of them if possible. And at the far end, you'll know an unusual area that is called the bronze room. It was a way for a family to show some class, but not spend a lot of money on having a room. There are 4 bronze sections. However, of those 4, they're lettered A, B, C, D. They're all at the top. A is for the Wilder family. They had the Lebanon Daily News. They do not have anybody interred there. They had their son, who was killed in France during World War II.
44.
In 44. He was brought back to the United States in 48, was put in there, and his mother did not want him in here and insisted he is removed and put out at the family plot in what becomes the new lawn section of Mount Lebanon Cemetery. So that whole strip right there is empty. Something also, if you look really closely at the numbering in here, what do you notice about the numbering of each of the crypts? They're all even numbers. There are no odd numbers. That was to avoid the number 13. They didn't want to use that number at all, so they're all even numbers. Some well-known family names here would be Hottenstein or Hottenstein. He had the largest Chevrolet dealership on the east coast of the United States. The Warlow family, Quinn family, who had the Lebanon Steel Foundry. Kraus, who had a hardware store.
Millard is here.
The quarry, they had the quarry in Anvil. The first interment, or the entombment, is the gentleman died in 1927. It was Mr. Kaiser. He was killed in an automobile accident in December of 1927. The mausoleum wasn't completed, but he had already purchased a piece of this idea. But he doesn't get interned until it's completed in February of 1929. But it runs very close. Mrs. Bright was also interred over here. She died in December of 28, and she's also reinterred in 1929 in February. I want to look closely at the dates to see who really was first. The architect, he also died before it was completed. He died in 1928. He's interred over here. I think it's number 70. Abner Richer. His body was put in holding in Philadelphia's West Laurel Hill Cemetery. Mrs. Bright and Mr. Kaiser, they were kept in Reading Mausoleum until this was completed. Then their bodies were put in place.
I spy a mayor of the city of Lebanon over here.
He was also put here in 1928. He was put in, he was one of the early entombments. He's at the bottom. Dr. John Walter, MD, very popular, and also was a mayor, the only Democrat mayor up to that point. I think, is that right?
I
Yes.
trust you in that.
Yeah, he was the only Democrat mayor from Lebanon for many, many years, decades really. Yeah. Oh, behind me is the columbarium. Lots of room. For the life of us, we cannot figure out how to open it. We have no idea.
Also leave flowers. Everybody who is interred here has a key to get in. Those who own rooms also have a different key for their room, which only they have, plus the office copy, of course. So some of them come in on a regular basis, some don't, and some of them leave flowers, some don't. Some of them leave other items. I'm sorry.
That's it.
I saw that.
A nip or two here and there, evidently, for whoever that was for. As you can see, there is room along the bottom, singles and doubles. So it's growing. People never seem to stop dying.